Hey, this is Tim Gaynor with Coach, Develop, and Inspire, and I want to welcome you to my 7th edition of What's Your Story? Today, I am very honored to have a very inspirational and positive individual, Carrie Creed, joining us today. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be an amazing show, amazing story that you guys are going to find out here in just a few minutes. But I wanted to kind of set this up again and kind of explain to everybody, why do I do What's Your Story stories? So really what I do, I found out just in my life and in my coaching business that a lot of people deal with some dark stuff. In fact, almost everybody has some sort of issue or some valley that they go through in life. And a lot of times people feel like they're the only ones going through it at that time. And they look at other people, and then as humans, we always make assumptions about other people. We make up stories about their lives. And so we kind of compare, because we're the only ones on the planet that knows every nanosecond of what we're thinking, of what we're going through. We're the only ones. And we take that, what's in our head sometimes, which a lot of times is garbage, and we take that and we compare it to other people's highlight reel. And then we're like, they just have it together. They would never understand. They never have any issues or negativity in their life. But that's not true. Everybody has gone through something or going through something now or will go through something. And once people realize that and hear other people's stories of what they've gone through and understanding you're not alone, there are other people out there that have done things as well and gotten through it. We could use those stories as inspiration, motivation, and education. And then maybe even more importantly, a way to find some traction if we're stuck in life, not able to get out of that valley, to move forward and then truly live the life that we really want and that we were made to live. So that's why I do these What's Your Story stories. So we all have an opportunity to learn from other people and see how that can help us in our day-to-day lives. So I'm glad you're listening to our episode number 7. So let's just get right into it. And so Carrie, let's talk about today. Tell us about your life. What is life like today for Carrie Creed? What are the things that you do? What's your business? What's your family like? What do you do for fun? Just however you want to answer that so we get a good understanding of what you're like today.
Sure. Thanks so much. My gosh, I could talk for 5 hours about that. There's so many exciting things going on in my life right now. And at such a pivotal time when we're all surrounded by a lot of negativity in the world and a lot of fear with COVID, I've decided to take the exact opposite approach, launch this business, which interesting enough, I had been working on since December, really since September, but September, October, November, we'll say, the end of last year. Right. And I always knew I was going to be launching, in the first quarter of 2020. I had no idea I'd be launching in the middle of COVID, and it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. So what's my life all about? I'm married to an incredible man who I have fallen in love with more times than I can count since we've been together and almost celebrating our 9-year marriage and our 15th year together. Awesome. As a couple. And we have 2 beautiful children, Tristan and Tenley. Tristan is 5 and Tenley just turned 2. And I not only have started this business, but I also have a full-time career in the payments industry for a fintech company. And I've been a very successful sales executive for them for the past 13 years.
So you got a lot of free time on your hand. You're a spouse, got 2 young kids, and you got a couple jobs. So
tons of free time.
Tons of free time. Awesome.
And not to mention, my family and I are always out and about, taking COVID out of it. I mean, even with this, we're always in nature. We love to fish as a family. We love to hike and explore. Nice. So we're taking every opportunity possible to be outside, even during this difficult time. But in general, when we're outside of these constraints, we travel the world with our kids. We are constantly going to new places. We love, museums. We love wine and good food. And, our kids have both gone to numerous fine dining restaurants ever since they've been toddlers, or little infants, I should say. So they love culture, and we've tried to create that as a family.
Awesome. That's great. I'm out here in Colorado, so we definitely love the camping and hiking as well. And we're big travelers too. So very fortunate to do that. All right. So what's maybe a couple of your favorite places you visited?
Ooh, my honeymoon was in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Cape Town was the most beautiful city we have ever been to. We try not to repeat trips. Mm-hmm. That one is a city that we said we'd come back to. Table Mountain was breathtaking. The whole area was just absolutely incredible. And then when we went up to Sabi Sands and did full safari, I mean, mm-hmm. you can't beat it. It's hard to go to a zoo after you've seen the real thing.
I'm sure. Yeah.
That was an amazing an amazing trip. We've also traveled, like I said, we're very much into wine. And so we've been to numerous vineyards through, Italy and obviously Napa and South Africa, Portugal. We've been to their Douro Valley. So we actually had a trip. We were in Portugal 2 years ago, and we were supposed to go to Spain in March with our two children and introduce our littlest one to our first European trip. It would have been my son's second. And that trip obviously got canceled because of COVID, but we'll reschedule that hopefully maybe next year on spring break.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. Yeah, you sound a lot like my wife and I. We've been fortunate to travel a lot, and we do kind of make it intentional not to go back. So there's so many places to see, but Italy for us is definitely a place. There's so much. We were there 2 weeks and we felt like we barely scratched the surface. So we would love to go back there too. But other than that, yeah, definitely sounds like you've got a wonderful life. I mean, a great family, very fortunate with your jobs and being able to do your hobbies and go visit the world. So that's awesome. So let's shift a little bit, let's go back a ways, to your childhood. What was that like? What did Carrie like to do as a kid? What was she involved in? Kind of what was your family life like? What was maybe even your favorite and maybe your not so favorite subject in school? Help us understand what you were like growing up.
Sure. So I grew up with my mom and dad and my older brother. His name is Craig, and he was 3 years older than me. And I always loved having the support of an older brother who could, pick on his friends or pick on other kids who were picking on me. I loved having an older sibling. And, we grew up in a very modest middle family, home and middle-class family home. And, I didn't necessarily have I didn't have any challenges that I can remember as a child. I had a great normal, upbringing. I'd be on my big wheels out front and we'd have snowball fights and, I'd play with my dolls and, we only had maybe one beach vacation a year. We didn't really travel much, money was tight. And, but that wasn't an issue for me then. My parents did separate when I was in 4th grade. And that was probably the start of me needing to find positivity and find survival and find perseverance. That's probably the most pivotal moment in my life that I can remember that didn't directly affect me in a different way. When you're 10, 11, 12, 13 and moving back and forth between parents' homes and not actually understanding why your parents separated because they never fought in front of us and they were very intentional to do that. So when they announced that they were separating, it was kind of a blow because I didn't understand it. And I'm grateful that my brother and I never saw them fight.
Right.
But, dealing with the separation and needing to move from your childhood home and then seeing your mom struggle and seeing different financial struggles occur within your family, that takes a toll on you as a young child. And it was very visible to me as I, entered into my teen years and above. And so those are the areas that I really started to realize that there's struggles that people go through. And I was hoping at that time that would be the only struggle that I would have, but it wasn't.
Yeah. Up to that point, definitely seems like a very typical childhood for a lot of people that are listening here, middle class. You weren't wanting for food and stuff, but you certainly didn't have a lot of things given to you, and had a sibling that you fought with, protected you, and just your parents. And then again, like a lot of folks, parents split up. So right at this point, kind of a typical childhood. But as you said, that wasn't the beginning or the end of things. In your later teen years, you ran into some difficulties, or you had them, but they just kind of came to the forefront a little bit with the condition that you had, and that kind of shifted you into maybe a different stage of life that you probably never thought you would have to. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, I never thought I would end up where I did. That's for sure. I was diagnosed with a syndrome called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and they say EDS for short. And there's multiple types of it, and I have a hypermobility type. I was misdiagnosed for many years, and while I was growing up, I noticed that I was a little different from my friends. I was tired. I had a lot of flexibility, which at that time was kind of fun to be able to do crazy tricks and party tricks, as they called it.
Right.
And it got very painful. And I realized when I was in dance class, I was, elevated up to go to toe shoes, and my ankles would collapse.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't do it. And at that point I didn't have a diagnosis, but I was at a pretty competitive dance studio and they were saying, Carrie, you need to strengthen your ankles. You need to be doing exercises. And I just didn't understand like why that was happening. And then when I played softball, my wrist was starting to sublux and I was having a lot of pain, and I was having knee pain and swelling, and I started wearing a knee brace, and I was in and out of physical therapy and to strengthen muscles, but no one ever figured it out. And then when I got to high school, once I had to stop playing all the sports, because let's face it, you play sports because they're fun and they're enjoyable. When they don't become fun and enjoyable anymore and they cause more pain, you have no choice but to stop. I mean, it wasn't going to be my professional to career. It was just something that I enjoyed doing, and I had to stop, and that was very difficult for me.
Right.
And I started making adaptations to how I did with school, and I started needing to use the elevator at my high school. And the teachers gave me 2 sets of books, ones that stayed at home and ones that stayed in the classroom. And so I wouldn't have to carry the heavy backpack around all day long in the hallways and go back and forth in my locker. And it was those little tiny changes that were great, but they also isolated me and made me feel different.
Right.
So I'm grateful for them, but it was challenging. I remember kind of darting into the elevator so no one would see me. And I never wanted to go in it when there was big crowds of kids around, because Ehlers-Danlos is an invisible illness. You would never know someone has it unless you see them in a wheelchair or using some sort of assistive device.
Yeah.
So that was hard. And I remember wanting to have something visibly wrong with me to have people understand it. Well, that wish kind of came true in a really bad way. My sophomore year in high school, all of a sudden I was actually at a basketball game, not playing, but supporting the team that I used to be on. And I had tremendous muscle weakness and an incredible amount of tremors. And I was with friends, and that mother had taken me right to the emergency room. And I later, returned home, and I was just having incredible weakness. And when I tried to walk, my leg was not bending correctly. And for whatever reason, this affected my right leg. I don't know why, but that's where it decided to focus on. So stay with me for a second. If you can picture yourself standing perfectly straight, your feet are going to be straight and your feet are parallel, and your kneecaps point straight, right? Very simple.
Yeah.
If you go to bend your legs, kind of do like a squat, your knees are going to point outward, perfectly straight, and they're going to stay parallel. Well, that's not what my leg did all of a sudden. My right knee bent completely behind my left leg, but my feet stayed parallel.
Wow.
So my whole leg realigned. And I then was, taken to Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, and I had lived 2+ hours from there. I needed a surgery. I was then diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos after being misdiagnosed for many, many years. And that actually had a really great feeling of finally.
Yeah, now you know.
Because I did a ton of research on that. And when my diagnosis first came back negative, because they were testing for the wrong classification of it, I knew that wasn't right. And when this geneticist saw me and she did her own testing and she diagnosed me with it without even knowing I was previously tried to be diagnosed, it was a sense of relief to have that. Right. And I had that surgery, and they were able to, pull the iliotibial band, that IT band in my leg, to kind of straighten my leg out. And I was hospitalized for a month or so. It put in extensive physical therapy, and I homeschooled throughout that whole summer to go on to my junior year. I said to myself, I am not staying back. And to make that even more impactful, I actually had to stay back in first grade. And I haven't ever talked about this, but I had to stay back in first grade due to a GI issue of me going back and forth to the hospital a lot, which, looking back on it, it was related to Ehlers-Danlos that no one knew about. And so I missed a day of school every single day, every week, or every 1 day per week.
Sure.
And so even though I didn't necessarily need to stay back, I was doing the work. My parents thought it was too much of a miss, and it wasn't consistent enough, and they wanted to give me a better, more consistent start. And so I stayed back in first grade, and I always hated that my friends moved and I didn't. So when I got to high school, I said to everyone, there is no way I am staying back. So that was another area of perseverance where I homeschooled throughout the entire summer. I continued my physical therapy. I even was so determined to go to the junior senior prom with my boyfriend at that time, who was older. And I got out of the hospital a week early, and I borrowed a dress from a girlfriend, and I went to that dance, and I left my cane in the car, because let's face it, a cane does not match a homecoming dress or a prom dress.
Right.
Just doesn't go.
No doubt.
I left that in the car, and I danced, and I lived life
Good.
to the fullest. And I ended up back in the hospital the next day. But you know what? I went to 1 Hour Photo, or I should say my mom went to 1 Hour Photo and got me all the images, and I hung them up on my hospital wall behind me. And when my orthopedic surgeon walked in and said, "What happened?" I said to him, "Look at these."
Yeah.
It was worth it. So it set me back a little bit, but I've had to choose things in my life to choose to go for and deal with the repercussions of it.
Yeah.
Because that's what living's all about.
Yeah, no, a lot in there, and I appreciate you obviously being transparent, sharing things about yourself, what some folks may have a hard time doing, and I appreciate that you're sharing that. We have a lot more in common than some of our side conversation. I realize I stayed back in third grade, so I did third grade twice, which, like you, doesn't normally come up in topic. Having a beer with guys, I stayed back in third grade. You? So it doesn't come up a lot. So yeah, definitely had that before, and I certainly understand what that's like. Then everybody's moving up and you're not, and certainly would never, as I finished school, would never wanted that to happen again too. But the things you said there of, a couple of words stuck out to is persevere and choices. As you're trying to, you said, I'm going to persevere. I'm not going to stay back. And that really gets into a lot of mindset stuff of what I know you're big into for sure, of your mindset of, I've set my mind to not staying back. Thus, that means this, and this, which means I have to do these things. So that's awesome. And then you said, I make choices every day. People make choices. And you made a choice to go to prom. You made a choice to live in that moment, probably even knowing some of the consequences, maybe not all of it, but you lived in that moment and you made that choice as well. And then just you're talking about, going through school, and I think probably 80% of high schoolers can relate to something of feeling self-conscious, feeling embarrassed, feeling like what they feel inside, no one can see on the outside. And yours was a medical condition, and you and I have talked before. I have a heart condition, which you can't see on the outside either. I mean, and it's, like you got to run the mile in school, and like, why is Tim taking forever? He must be out of shape. I'm not out of shape. I just have a broken part. So definitely understand, even if it's not a condition like that, I think a lot of people that are listening, if the high schoolers are listening, or people that can relate to that back in school, having that feeling. How did you work through that? What were some of the things in your head? Because a lot of people, as we know, suicide's up. A lot of people drop out of school because of that pressure. What were the things that you specifically did to kind of stay on the positive track and kind of work through that?
Yeah, I did numerous things without even recognizing the importance of them. And I've never been asked that question that directly, and it's making me think in the moment. When I stopped playing sports, I said to myself, well, I need to fill that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got involved with student council. I became the class president. I was on the honors society. I wasn't on the diving team anymore. So I became the swim and diving team timer manager and ran the whole computer system.
Right.
I worked another part-time job at an ice cream shop. I was a babysitter. I filled that time that I would have been in sports practice with other activities to better myself.
Yeah.
And I don't think I realized in the moment what I was doing and the benefit that would then give me later in life. But I find myself still doing that today, of filling that void with other activities to help myself get better.
Yeah, that's awesome. What I heard you just say there too is, that lane got closed, but I didn't go backwards and not do anything. I picked another lane and I did things in that lane that I enjoyed. It's not like these are things I enjoy. I can't do that, but I can do this. You weren't focusing on what you can't do. You were focusing on, well, I can do this, this, and this, which I think that's a lot of folks get stuck in that the lanes, they can't go any farther and they don't know what to do versus
it's all about the pivot. You have to pivot.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I always think of Friends in the hallway moving, pivot, Chandler. All right. So yeah, you absolutely did. Again, even if it wasn't like you sat down, here's what I'm going to do, it was something that you did that actually helped you through that transition of high school, maybe feeling some of that self-doubt and things that you're going through, which applies to anybody at that age that is maybe having some issues of not being able to go down the path they want to, but there are other paths that they can go to. So let's talk a little bit about that surgery. Maybe so you had surgery on your leg, and kind of maybe talk us through that, and how long that took. I think some of the stuff I was reading up on you is that took a little bit of while, your rehab and working through that. And then maybe again, same thing, talk about your mindset. What were the things that you specifically and intentionally did to kind of get through that?
Mm-hmm. So the second surgery on my leg is the one that was really transformational. So after my surgery in high school, and after I, got better after reversing some stuff with going to the prom,
Right.
I moved on. I went to my junior year. I went to my senior year. I graduated high school, and I thought I was in the clear. And because of my love of medicine and how I, helped diagnose myself and all of the research I had done, I had chose to go into nursing. And I got a scholarship actually to go to a university for nursing, and I started school. And again, everything was great. And it was around the time of finals of my freshman year where I remember this day. I can almost remember the weather, what I was wearing, the exact spot on the pavement when I looked down at my leg and noticed my right knee just moving in a little bit and just bending a little bit towards my left leg. So nothing like I explained earlier, just
Sure.
a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's different. Okay. So I remember that evening I called my mom and I was like, hey, can you just call, the doctor and just make an appointment, now that finals are over in a week and a half, maybe I'll just go see him and just to double check everything's good.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, within 3 or 4 days, I was completely crippled again.
Oh, wow.
And I was in a wheelchair and unable to walk. And the same exact thing happened with my leg. Even worse this time, actually, but very similar to anyone else who would have seen it. So I did have that appointment, and that surgeon told me the worst news. At first, he wanted me to go to inpatient rehab to see if that would work. But we had found out that I was way too far gone for that, and that my surgery in fact failed from 1999, and that I would have to undergo the most radical, intense, complicated, and frightening, even barbaric surgery I had ever heard of.
Wow.
And it was a double rotational osteotomy. So you're all probably thinking, what is that?
I don't need to know the rest. The double rotation got me. Rotation, that's not good on any body part.
No. Well, the word osteotomy means cut, so I think at least. So what the surgeons had to do when I was under general anesthesia, thank God, was literally take a saw and saw through my femur, my thigh bone, and saw through my tibia and fibula, my lower leg bone, and rotate my leg in opposite directions. So my femur was rotated, I think it was 45 degrees externally, and my tibia and fibula was 35 degrees internally. And then 12 external fixators, like big pins, were sticking out of my leg, and they were attached to 2 black metal rods. And that was going to realign my leg so it would no longer bend in the direction it was before. What they did in the previous surgery was just pull a ligament and have that ligament then hold my bone. But because the Ehlers-Danlos, meaning I'm so flexible and my ligaments are all stretched out,
right,
that ligament just re-stretched back out. So they had to do something more final, which is readjusting the bones.
Wow.
Well, I mean, getting that news as a 20-year-old woman after their freshman year in college and being told, you're not going to go back to school next year, was devastating. I mean, absolutely devastating for a variety of factors. Selfishly and silliness, I was more concerned about my best friend's wedding and how I'd be in that. And I'd had this, they put a cast on my leg to help my ankle not bend, because the way your leg works, if your ankle can't flex, your knee can't bend the right way and it's connected to your hip. So it kind of helps you stay straight. I was worried about the silly things, my part-time job and my dorm room and, all those things that don't really matter in life, but that we fixate on when things change. And I was told I was going to miss one semester of school, just one. And I was like, okay, well, I could still probably catch up and still continue with my class. All right, I can deal with that.
Right.
I missed 2 years
Mm.
and had every complication possible. So I had the surgery on September 12th, 2002. So it was 1 year after the whole 9/11. And, I really remember that because I was in a hotel room on 9/11 because we drove to Philadelphia because I didn't live there to stay overnight because the surgery was in the morning. And I remember watching the TV of, the year anniversary and just crying.
Mm.
And I was crying because of 9/11, but I was also crying in fear and anxiety of what was going to happen to me, 8-10 hours later. And I just very much remember those moments. But I got through that surgery, and I can admit that I had a little bit of a panic attack in pre-op, when they're about to take me back. And I was really, really scared as a 20-year-old, really scared for the surgery. But I got through it. I had some immediate complications right after surgery. But my mom was so grateful to persevere and help me. I had some issues breathing and they wanted to trach me and she didn't allow that. And so she had to remind me to breathe every 3 seconds for over 24 hours. To not have me be trached. So there's some definite parts of major teamwork and perseverance as a family and what she did for me. And I never left that hospital for 73 days.
Wow.
And either did my mom. She slept in a chair next to my bed for 73 days. And she was my right-hand woman and my advocate when I couldn't be my own. And the pain level and the intensity of what I had went through is so difficult to describe. I ended up having staph MRSA from the first surgery and having another complication, which the upper pin in my thigh was falling out and I was having tremendous bone pain. So I had to have a second surgery to repair that and try to remove some of the infection. And what that did is it stunted the growth in my leg, what we found out. Because if you have a cast on your arm or your leg, your bones will just heal, right? Your doctor tells you you'll have your cast off in 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is, and your bone just heals. With this type of operation, considering it's such a clean line that they're sawing, your bones don't know to grow back together unless there's pressure on them. So the only way to get those bones to calcify and regrow is the pressure. And the only way to do pressure is walking. So I had to walk multiple times a day with my leg broken in multiple spots with pins sticking out of my leg.
Mm-hmm.
And it was horrific.
Right.
But I created goals and my physical therapist pushed me, and it was take 2 steps, do the full length of the parallel bars. Let's do 3 lengths of the parallel bars. Let's cross through the parallel bars and go into the hallway. Mm-hmm. And I did it. And, I continued to have some complications, but I got sent home after 73 days, right before Thanksgiving, for the only reason that they had said, keeping you inpatient won't help you anymore. Like there's nothing more that we can do for you. And that was disheartening to kind of hear because I was nowhere near healed or better.
Right.
But they said I needed to go home to be in a hospital bed in my living room in my mom's apartment. And I needed to have physical therapy 3 times a day. And they were kind of like, good luck. Let us, we'll have mobile X-ray units come in to see, we'll continue with your blood work with people coming to see you and it'll be good. And at that point, my mom and I were pretty nervous.
Right. Yeah. The story you said a lot there. I don't want people to miss some of those key points that you said. When we don't expect things in life is usually when things become hard. When you went in for your surgery, I doubt the expectations was 73 days in a hospital.
Nope.
So mentally alone, once you know that you're continuing to not go home, that changes, just as humans, it changes kind of our outlook on things. And it usually goes negative if we run against something that we're not expecting. And the other thing you said is, you set goals, small goals. It's 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps. Those 2 things to me is a huge analogy to life. And most of life, we base what we expect, usually not on reality. It's on a book or TV show or a movie, or again, someone's social media highlight reel that we think, wow, why isn't my life like them? And then when it's not, our expectations are not met, and then things go south. And then we struggle looking at the big goal, like, I need to lose 20 pounds. Well, how about one? Let's do one. Let's do two. Let's do three. Or your situation, I got to walk. Great. Walk to the end of the room, walk back to your bed. Tomorrow we'll walk outside the door. We'll walk back to the bed. We'll walk to the next room and we'll walk back. And that's how anything's accomplished. You don't start with, hey, I need you to walk around this hall 4 times. You don't start walking around 4 times. You start with, let me make it to the door and back. So I think that what you said there, not only in your situation is huge, but I think in anybody's life when they're dealing with things, what you just said there of those small goals and understanding that, if your expectations may not be met, then you might be in a dark place, in a negative place. So how did you change from that, knowing that at one point you're like, I thought I was going home now and I'm not? So what was your mentality like at that moment? And then how did you change that to make it through the rest of those 73 days?
What helped me in that scenario is the exact opposite what helped me in the scenario that was more recent that we'll get into. Not knowing the end date gave me hope. If they had told me day one that I was going to miss 2 years of school, I'd be in the hospital for 73 days and then home. And then, the next part of the story I'll share with you soon. I think I would have had a very difficult time accepting that and dealing with that. What I held on to is the hope that next week would be different. So if I kept pushing and if I kept excelling, I was going in the right direction.
Yeah.
And so every week when I never really thought about giving up, because I'd say to myself, I've already come this far. If I was going to give up, I should have did it day one. And why would I give up day one? There'd be no point of even having the surgery.
Right.
So I've already accepted that there is no option to give up. Giving up would have been not having the surgery and staying in the wheelchair for the rest of my life. And that's not what I wanted.
Yeah.
So I just kept, at the time I didn't realize I was like, quote unquote, persevering, but I was in a way that I just had so much hope and faith that the hard work I was putting in, and it was all going to be worth it.
Yeah.
And it was.
Yeah. I love that there of, almost from the goal setting perspective, we'll just use the 20 pounds again. At some point you're going to lose 5. Take a moment, turn back and see what you've achieved. I've achieved that. That's awesome. That should be a little more fuel to turn back around. Let me do the next 5. Turn back around. That's 10. That's awesome. I get some fuel, go back. Seeing what you're accomplished, like you said, every time, look back. Here's what I've done so far. I'm continuing to move forward. I'm going towards, and again, that hope and belief of like, if I keep going this way, it's going to work out. Something positive is going to work out. If I don't go anywhere, odds are it's not going to work out, or if I might even go backwards. So I definitely appreciate that of just, again, tying that to in life, of take time to acknowledge and see, but turn around, see what you've accomplished, fuel that fire, turn back around and keep going forward to what you're trying to achieve. So no, awesome. Yeah, let's shift gears a little bit there. So I feel like I'm doing one of those TV commercial ads where it's like, that's not all. For $19.99, you get this and this, and if you order in the next 2 minutes, you also get this. So I think your life, everybody was like, God, that's enough. Geez, Carrie, awesome. Hope things are great from you from here on out. However, you have something else to add to your story that has really defined who you are today. And it occurred during one of your pregnancies.
I did. And for the listeners, I did go through the rest of the leg surgery, and the pins did come out with multiple complications, but I had a chance of losing my leg, which I didn't. And I'm very grateful for that. So after 18 months of recovery and rehabilitation, I was able to return to school and move on with my life. So there is a positive ending to that story.
Absolutely.
So I did want to just touch on that.
Sure. Yeah.
So again, I went back to college. I did have to change universities. I did have to change my major per the advice of the doctors, and not being able to most likely doing floor nursing and transferring patients and all of that. And to be closer to Philadelphia. They did not want me to live 2 hours away because of how the final surgery went. It was still very risky. So I moved to Philadelphia and changed universities. And again, thought life was great. Met a new boyfriend who's now my husband, and everything was wonderful. I continued with school, and I ended up graduating in 3 years then. So I had a total of 4 years of schooling that took 6 years. And all was good. My boyfriend turned into my fiance. He turned into my husband. We got married in 2011. I graduated college in 2007. Life is good. Bought a home. We had our first child in 2015. And even getting pregnant and deciding to start that was something that we had to have a really candid conversation about, because
Mm.
my pregnancy was going to be high risk due to the Ehlers-Danlos. I was very concerned about the added weight of the baby on my legs
Mm.
and how that would play out with surgery. Was very concerned about how that would affect me from an exercise standpoint, because exercising to keep my muscles in shape
Mm.
is extremely important for my joints to stay stable and not to sublux and dislocate,
Mm.
to avoid future surgeries.
Sure.
Well, we decided to push through, and I was monitored extremely closely. And my pregnancy went overall very well. There was some debate on doing a C-section or a vaginal delivery, and they were very nervous that if a nurse was pulling back my legs and I had an epidural, that my hips would dislocate and I wouldn't be able to stop them. So luckily, we didn't have to make that decision. And my son turned out to be breech, and so he had to be delivered as a cesarean. So my C-section was booked at 38 weeks to make sure it was early enough that I didn't go into preterm labor. And he was healthy. And again, everything was great. My recovery was definitely longer than a typical mom because of the Ehlers-Danlos,
Mm-hmm.
but I recovered. And I, went back I was working full time prior, and I went back to work after maternity leave. And again, life was great. And people had said, someday you'll share your story and someday you'll write a book. And I said, yeah, I'd love to do that. I've always loved public speaking. And yeah, I definitely will. I definitely will. And I always had it up here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we decided to get pregnant again. And we wanted to expand our family. And I went back to see my high risk doctors, and they were monitoring everything closely, and everything looked great up until my 20-week anatomy scan. And during that very important ultrasound, we learned that our daughter, we were having a little girl, was fine. She was wonderful. 10 fingers, 10 toes, everything was great. The issue was with me.
Mm.
And I had placenta previa, which just means your placenta is low and it's covering your cervix, which is where the baby would typically exit out of. So I'd have to have a C-section. And I was like, oh, okay. I was going to have a C-section probably anyways,
Right.
so no big deal. And then the doctor had shared with me that I had an increased chance of bleeding because of this, and that I could go into labor early, and that because of an existing health condition separate from EDS, I was also on a blood thinner of daily injections. And so an increased chance of bleeding and on a blood thinner, it's never a good combo.
Yeah.
Well, this is in December, and my work schedule was pretty hectic, and I was traveling the world. Actually, I was even in Germany for a business meeting, and I was traveling everywhere. Very hectic time, but things were okay. And I was put on a travel ban at 23 weeks. They just wanted to keep me close, and got through the holidays, got through New Year's, still thinking I'm fine. And then Friday, January 5th, 2018 came, and I ran an errand on my lunch hour, and I started hemorrhaging. And I'll never forget that moment because, not to get too detailed, but when you feel wetness and you didn't pee yourself,
Right.
It's not good. And I was either my water breaking or I was bleeding.
Right.
And neither one of those would have been a good scenario. And so when I excused myself to the ladies' room and I saw blood everywhere, I immediately called 911. And I was actually pretty shocked at how calm I was, because I was mostly afraid to pass out and for the ambulance to come and to not know why I was bleeding.
Right.
And so I wanted to tell that 911 operator, how many weeks pregnant I was on, that I was on the blood thinner, that I had placenta previa, that I was bleeding because of XYZ reasons, that my doctor is, I wanted to lay it all out. And long story short, I got taken to the hospital and the baby was still fine. And I got transferred to another hospital with a level 3 NICU just in case I had to deliver. And I never left that hospital for 65 days. So it was kind of deja vu with hospital bed rest situations. And a few of my friends, made a ton of jokes, as I'm sure you can imagine. They're like, oh, there she goes again. You got this, Carrie. You are going to totally crush it. And I kind of said to them, like, guys, this is totally different. With my leg surgery, I was 20 years old with not really a care in the world, didn't have any financial responsibilities, didn't have anyone else I reported to, or
Right.
and I was very sick on a lot of pain medicine, laying in bed, watching TV, just very sick. I am perfectly fine from a mental capability. I have a career, I have bills to pay, I have a 2.5-year-old son at
Right.
home, I have a husband. This was different.
Mhm.
And I immediately knew after they told me that I really wasn't going anywhere. And at that point, I never thought it would be 65 days, but I immediately knew, okay, well, my leg surgery, I didn't know what the ending was going to be. I knew my due date was April 15th. So the most final I could get to is that. So at first I focused on, April, the due date, like I'm not gonna be here forever. What happened with my leg surgery can't happen. And I knew that I had to pull from the strategies that I implemented with my leg surgery without even knowing I implemented strategies. But what
Right.
I did then to be successful and to persevere in that scenario, I needed to do it now and
Mhm.
fast. And that's what I did.
Yeah. That's so close to 140 days total, 2 incidents in a hospital. Most people don't spend more than a week their entire life in a hospital. And I think I shared with you before, I spent a month in a hospital with one of my surgeries. And um, so I personally know how difficult that is. I don't care what you're going through, how difficult that is. So that's certainly a lot of respect from everybody, but certainly from those of us that have spent extra time in a hospital. That's an amazing that you were able to do that, and where you're at now. So you spent the 65 days in the hospital. Obviously, you're sitting here right now. So things turned out. Obviously, at some point, things turned out well enough for you to go home, and like you said at the very beginning, your children are older, and you went through that. I'm curious, as after you. So maybe part of that, the story with that pregnancy. How did you implemented those things from the first surgery in the second time you were in the hospital, and maybe talk a little bit about some of what those things were, and then how that ended up once you left. How did you get out? How did you mentally and physically get yourself in a place to get out of the hospital?
Yeah, so with my leg surgery, when I was home on bed rest for 6 months with the pin still in, I needed to take control. And that's
Mm,
really my first tip is find a way to take control. And taking control means first finding the things you can control. So
absolutely.
even this COVID environment, we can't control what groceries are available or if toilet paper is in the grocery store or anything like that, or our schools, our kids' schools closed. But
Right.
we can control many things that we do throughout our day and how we act in front of our children and what we choose to do in our professional and personal lives.
Hmm.
So find the things when you're struggling that you can control and write them down and then act on them.
Right.
So in my leg surgery at home, there wasn't a lot of things I could control, but the little things were, this is going to sound ridiculous, but the way my stuffed animals were lined up in bed, the order my blankets were laid on me before I went to sleep.
Mm.
And I started listening to a spiritual show, The Hour of Power. And I do need to look up if that's even still on TV. I don't even
Yes.
know if it is. But it was all about, positive quotes. And I would write them down, this little purple notebook that I had attached to my bed rail in a little plastic bin.
Hmm.
And I would read those quotes before I went to bed. And there was a new song that had came out about walking through the rain. It was a Mariah Carey song that I had heard, I think, while watching Oprah one day. And it lit a fire in me. And I
Mm.
said, I am going to walk again. And I visualized myself walking down the aisle someday, but I'd be married with some great man who I hadn't met yet. And I was like, I am going to do this. And I would listen to that song 3 times before I went to bed. And it was very similar to what I did with the pregnancy. So as my condition worsened throughout that 65 days and it became a life or death situation for me,
Mm.
and my due date was moved up and I wasn't able to carry her past 34 weeks. So March 6th became the last possible day I could be there. And even though no one said I'd get there, I told them I would.
Right.
And how I controlled that was having a homemade calendar and crossing off the days every day and just doing a big red circle around March 6th. And I went online, I printed out or made motivational quotes in Microsoft Word and emailed them to my husband and said, print these and bring them to me. And I made a wall of motivation. And I ordered a custom banner off of Etsy that said, keep on cooking, baby sister, because that's what we'd call her. And I hung that up in my room, and my friends and family sent me flowers, and my son made me artwork. And I decorated that room better than my dorm room in college. It was amazing. And it created this positive atmosphere for me, because I said to myself, I need to control this. The hospital room and environment isn't positive. It's not uplifting. I need to make it uplifting, and I need to keep myself busy. So we talked a little bit earlier about being busy and finding ways to fill voids. When I couldn't do sports anymore, I found other things to do in high school. So what did I do when I was in the hospital? I continued working full time. My boss said to me, all right, Carrie, look, you're going to take maternity now. It's all good. You know, I said, absolutely not. I am not ready to go on maternity. First of all, I don't take maternity till the baby ever comes, because I want every single possible day with my child.
Sure.
So no. And I need, from a mental capability, to continue to work. Things weren't tied up the way I wanted. I had still had a very large deal I was working on, and I needed that focus. And so I kept going. And I found that controlling my schedule throughout the day, even if it was a little bit OCD, it helped me. You know, having more than 2 visitors a day was exhausting. Talking to people for more, like one visitor for an hour and another visitor for an hour, it was just draining. It didn't help me anymore. And when you're on bed rest, your energy level really decreases. And even my workload to put together proposals or emails took me 4 times longer than it should have. So I realized no more than 2 visitors, and that I shouldn't have back-to-back conference calls. And I should do, you know, visitor conference call. They should monitor the baby, and I'll lay down and take a rest. Then I'll let the doctor come in. And yes, I did have a schedule for when the doctor could see me. That's unheard of in a hospital. Usually they come in whenever they want. No, I told them when my availability was for them to come in.
That's funny.
And they got a kick out of it, because they knew it was helping me from a mental standpoint.
Sure.
So, you know, there was a woman that was there prior to me being checked in, and she was only there for a couple weeks. And about 2 days after I arrived, she actually checked herself out against medical advice. And she said, from a mental capability, I can't handle this anymore. I need to be home with my husband. I need to be home with my other children. And you're right when you said, when you was so sweet to give me credit earlier, it is a mental game. It's all mental.
It is. And
you need to stay on top of it, because it could crush you. And so I made that schedule and I stuck with it, and the days flew. They really started, and I got adapted to it, and I adjusted. And even though it was extremely traumatic, because at any moment I could have bled and had a very good chance of dying and losing our daughter and my husband losing me, I tried not to focus on that. And I just kept pushing forward and saying, I'm going to get to March 6th. And I did. Yeah.
No, I love everything that I hear out of what you're saying there. I'm summarizing in our brain is, and this is not news to anybody, is the most powerful part of our body that we have. It controls, it truly is the rudder of our life. It dictates where we're going to go. And how we shift it, how we turn it, is the path we're going to take. And the couple things that you were saying there, when you're visualizing where you want to be, I'm going to visualize myself in a family with a husband, and I'm visualizing that. Some people may look at that and go, that's silly. It's not silly, because when that visualization, what it's doing is telling your mind, this is the path we're going down. And then once you kind of tell your mind, this is the path we're going down, that ends up being the path that you go down.
Absolutely. That's so true. People don't realize that if we focus on the things that lift us up, we will never go down.
Yeah.
Like we can't focus on the things that bring us down. We can't stay in the negative. We can't surround ourselves with negative people, because that's where we'll end up.
Yeah, and that putting the positive quotes, and you may have some in your office there, but you need it more in the situation in the hospital, because it's so easy to fall into the negative when you're hospital. But if you have those things around, even if you're not reading it, you see it, and then your mind's picking it up anyhow, and so it's translating that into the output, which again, we all know our brain's a computer. What goes in comes out. So if you're seeing that, you're reading that, and that's all around you in your environment, that's how you're going to act. That's how you're going to behave. you're going to be positive because of the situation and the environment. Like you said, your hospital room, you set that up in a very positive environment, which makes it easier to get through it. That doesn't mean you didn't have tough hours, tough days. That doesn't mean that at all. But it means it's changed your mindset on, I have a goal, I've seen the goal, I visualized it, and here are the things I'm going to do every damn day so I get there. And that's by having the positives. That's by controlling your environment, controlling what you can control. And I think people miss that in all areas of life. Of, you know, what is an RS people? It says, what do you want? What is it your life to look like? Like you and I, we haven't seen each other in 10 years, and now we just catch up. What do you want to tell me your life looks like? Visualize what that looks like, and then work your way back to today. Start moving that direction. Now that you have a visualization picture in front of you, work your way to it. And that's exactly what I heard you say you did to get through that.
100%. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's what I know that I can help so many people with by my story.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the real reason why I decided to launch this business now and really start my speaking platform, because, you know, yes, I had a great story with just my leg surgery. And, you know, even with the pregnancy, it's a totally separate situation where, you know, tragedy struck twice and it has a positive ending. But it had so many bumps after I came home. Something happened to me that I never realized would. After I left that hospital and my daughter had to, you know, stay in the NICU for 18 days. And, you know, I recovered, which was very lengthy. And I was on maternity leave for a few months. And I had this just very strange feeling. Something wasn't right. And I couldn't put my finger on it. I couldn't figure out what was going on. Was it because I was home now and I got used to the hospital? Was it that I was recovering from surgery? You know, the surgery that I had to have when my condition worsened is I had to have a full hysterectomy, because in order to save my life, they had to remove my uterus because my placenta would never detach. And so that was very hard to accept, because I'd never be able to have more children. And that choice was taken from me. At that time, I wasn't sure if we ever would, but I still wanted the choice. Right. And knowing that I'd be under general anesthesia for that, and I'd have a blood transfusion because I would hemorrhage during that really risky surgery, and I'd miss the delivery, and there was a possibility for some lifelong medical issues, was very difficult to handle. And, you know, those 65 days in the hospital had a lot of mental thoughts of some trauma. Even though I tried to block it out, I knew what was happening. I knew the stakes were high, and I knew what the possibilities were. And so when I came home and tried to think that everything was just fine and I'll take my daughter and run some errands or go to the gym and go out to lunch with some friends, it just didn't feel right. And my bonding with her was off because I didn't get to take her home. I left the hospital after 65 days alone. And that is so hard. And I know there are so many parents who have their children who go to the NICU and they deliver and then they go home. And I've heard many moms talk about that. And it's similar, but yet I was there for 65 days with my goal of delivering a healthy baby. And then I got to go home and celebrate being home while my daughter was not with me. It was such a weird juxtaposition of situations and emotions. So I think that's what started out my battle with post-traumatic stress disorder. And I wasn't diagnosed with that till 4 months postpartum. And, you know, I didn't have any major issues with it until 4 months postpartum, when this anger just erupted from me. This sadness, this anger, the triggers when people announced pregnancy, when I saw someone having their third child, which I can never have, when I saw an ad for maternity clothes, which I'll never wear again. I just had all this. I was so annoyed. I was so angry. I was so sad. And all of those horrible feelings that you try to push away for so long were just coming up to the surface. And thankfully I was in therapy, and they had said to me after I left the hospital that good for me to go in weekly therapy and talk through some stuff. I had been through a lot, and I agreed. And for the first 4 months, my sessions were like, I'm good, everything's good. And we talked through some stuff, and nothing ever really happened until I exploded. And I was so confused that, you know, Carrie, who is the positive one, who has gone through all these trials and tribulations with my leg in the hospital and in the pregnancy in the hospital, and how positive I was. And don't get me wrong, I had nights of crying and I had moments of being very upset, but I didn't stay there. So in general, 90% of the time I was positive. How could Carrie, be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I remember saying to my therapist, like, isn't that what war veterans get? Like, I'm confused. Like, what?
Yeah.
And it was at that moment that I was like, okay, well, here's another obstacle. I need to overcome it. And I went through a special type of therapy called EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And it was incredible. And thankfully, very ironically, the therapist who I was matched with from day one was certified in this, because there's not a lot of therapists that are. And we went through this really specialized therapy to heal the trauma in my brain so I could move from it. And I had to relive the trauma and relive moments and relive the different scenarios that went on throughout those 65 days. And there was a lot of them in order to move through it. And today I'm so grateful that I feel like I'm 95% healed from that because of the work that I had put in.
Sure.
And I remember thanking my therapist, and she said, don't thank me. You know, you did the work. You did it. You went through it. I just guided you.
Right.
And when I healed from it, I sat back and I really thought to myself, now is the time to launch this business. I'm emotionally able to talk about it, because prior to being healed from the PTSD, and I think I'll always carry some of that with me, but prior to being healed from it, I was too emotional. I could never have this interview with you or talk to anyone about my experience without probably, crying hysterical or, feeling very uncomfortable. But once I healed from it and realized that when I got diagnosed with the PTSD, I thought I failed. And I said that to my therapist. I said, I failed. And she looked at me, she said, what do you mean? I said, I didn't overcome it. I didn't do it. Like, how did I fail? And when I realized that I didn't fail and it was just a bump in my journey that got me to the end point of where I am today, that's what I want to like scream to the rooftops, is that we all go through challenges, and it's not always the road isn't in one, it doesn't always go up. And sometimes your adventure goes like this, and sometimes there's just one dip, but it's how we continue on.
Yep.
And I could have just gave up in that moment. I could have gave up with the connection of my daughter. I could have quit my job, because when I went back from maternity leave, I was in a bad spot, a really bad spot. And I hid it from everybody. And it took me a long time. And I feel like if I wasn't as strong as I had been in the past, I might have quit. But I knew that wasn't an option. I knew that wasn't me. And I persevered again. And so now that I see all those puzzle pieces of my whole life coming together, that's the story I want to share, because I really want to inspire and empower others who feel like now it's their time to give up. They just can't take one more thing, and they just can't be pounded down one more time. And there's just no point to go on. There's always a reason to go on. And you just have to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because I promise you it's there. It's there. And it was for me.
Yeah, absolutely. You can take over the show. That was awesome. That's absolutely perfectly said, of that determination to go on, and that's because you saw something, you grabbed onto it, and you weren't going to let go. That's going to pull you in that right direction. So definitely the inspiration that hopefully people get out of this, or just think, what is that one thing? It could be just simple. What is that one thing to grab onto, even if it's with your pinky finger? Grab onto it, and that's what's going to help you start moving forward. So maybe let's just wrap this up. What would be a few things that you would say to someone who is going through a difficult time? Just maybe one, two, three things that you would maybe say, hey, here's some things that you can do now to get you through what you're going through.
So the first one is definitely find things you can control, like I touched on earlier. So identify those, because when you feel powerless, you feel that there's nothing that you can do that's going to make it better. You feel like the issue is going to, surround you, and there's nothing you can do. So identifying the things that you can do is key to taking over control. The next one is being positive. And it's really sometimes hard when you get really negative news to figure out how to twist it to look at the glass half full and not half empty.
Yep.
But that is so important to mindset.
It is. It's
so important, because as you acknowledged earlier, when you surround yourself with positive quotes, positive thoughts, then your mind and your body stays positive. When we surround ourselves with negative thoughts, negative people, negative concepts, we clam up, we get tired, we get like sad.
Yeah.
So, take control, be positive, and always persevere. It is okay to take a moment and be pissed off when something goes wrong.
Right.
It's okay to be sad when something goes wrong that you had planned on and worked so hard on, but it's not okay to not persevere.
Yeah.
Take a moment, acknowledge it, but push forward and get out of there. So they're kind of like my 3 Ps of perseverance, positivity, and powerful, with taking control and be powerful. So that's definitely my main tips today.
That's awesome. That is great stuff, and I appreciate you sharing that. And anybody that's out there, again, that is going through a difficult time, or you're like, I've not gone through anything, I don't want to be the one telling you. The odds are you'll probably have to go through something in life. That's just the way it's set up for us. And hopefully you've taken some things away from what Carrie's story is and things that she shared to help you through that. Pick yourself up, find some traction, and move forward. I'm a big believer in investing in yourself, investing in your development, and your moving forward, helping yourself get better at things. And that's exactly what you're providing, Carrie. You're providing opportunities for other people to invest in themselves, invest in their lives. Just that mental mindset of developing, becoming stronger, so they can deal with this difficult times they're going through now, or that they may come up later down the road. So I cannot thank you enough for your time today, Carrie. It was wonderful hearing your story, and I know people that are going to listen to this podcast are going to benefit from it greatly. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I would love if anyone would like to follow my journey. You can find me at Facebook and Instagram at Carrie Creed Speaker. And you can also find out a lot more about me and see some great video footage on my website at carriecreed.com. So I hope that my story continues to inspire you all, and never give up, and stay positive, because you've got this.
Absolutely. Well said. We'll drop it from there. Awesome. Great job. Thank you very much again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.